Everyone of every race has seen the increased racism and genuinely vile content towards Indians. You can see it on Reels, on X, YouTube Shorts. Social media won't stop shoving it down my throat even though I have made it clear that I'm not interested. I'm black, a black girl specifically, and so I can understand how it feels to have your race used against you on social media. It's the type of thing you can't really explain to people because a lot of people tend to gaslight you on it. Back when I was trying out Threads, I was just on a normal post and out of nowhere, a woman in the comments said the most vile thing I've ever read about any human being, just talking about Indians with this pure inhumanity which I will not be repeating here. It was so extreme and so detailed and specific it seemed like a murderer's manifesto. I was really distressed reading it, and I was even shocked that any kind of hate speech to that degree was allowed online. Or even anywhere. Couldn't even imagine anyone would think such cruel thoughts. You'd think the entire race of India locked her up in a chamber and tortured her. So I checked the woman's profile, and to my surprise, she was not a troll from what I could see, but she was Pakistani. I don't know much about the Pakistan and India issues, but I do know there are a lot of factors including religion, among other things. Regardless of what it is, there is really no kind of justification for that kind of behavior towards other humans. It's almost as if they're trying so hard to deflect so they won't be the target. So my first point, some of the attacks are from next door. I want to frame the political environment for you. Have you heard of when people say any variant of, "we take our health for granted until something awful happens"? Think about politics like that. The main enjoyer of social media politics would be the winners, white people. Because when they talk, they're not going to have statistics thrown in their face or be spammed the N-word in their comment section. They're not going to feel personally affected by many things spoken about in politics because for starters, they don't have anything to lose, and they don't really have stereotypes against them that hold any weight because they're the ones writing them. For example, although it's cruel and unnecessary, when people call them colonizers it's not like they'll go home crying saying they wish they weren't white. They'll be angry towards the minority that dared to call them that. Meanwhile, if you call enough black kids the N-word or tell them they're ugly or ghetto, most likely a lot of them will wish to change. Same with Indians, they'll want to change. And so when you think about the winners in politics, you realize that they're the ones controlling your outcomes. So that brings me to my Pakistan point. Anyone who has been online long enough knows that there's a swinging pendulum for hatred online. People are just not satisfied without complaining and therefore they find things to complain about. And so currently we're in the hatred of Indians stage, but Islam seems to be overlapping. As most people are aware, Pakistan is a mostly Islamic country, and therefore, it's a double-edged sword for a lot of racist Pakistanis. A lot of people are aware that when people are done with hating on Indians, because most of them are Hindus, they'll be on to Muslims. So that would be Pakistan territory. A good way to put this into perspective would be to think of people and their appearance. Now, excuse my ignorance, but to a lot of non-Indian and non-Pakistani people, it's almost impossible to tell the difference. So when people mistake a Pakistan person for an Indian, it's almost like they're receiving the racism that they quote-unquote don't deserve, and that's why they get so frustrated and deflect. But they also use this to their advantage. For example, on Instagram Reels there was a video of some seemingly Indian people dancing, not doing anything wrong from what I could see, but the comments always have something to say. However, the first few comments I had seen were saying these people were actually Pakistani and gave some concrete evidence. The rest of the comments were spamming the Indian flag and the classic well nonsense. And like clockwork, opened the profiles of some of the Indian flag spammers and again they were Pakistani. Obviously a lot of other people too, but this was enough to tell me that there's this mentality that makes them think they're safe from racism as long as they deflect, when this is not the case. Here is a pendulum draft briefly explaining things. And so as you can see, we are in 2025 and nearly in 2026, all stages points to hatred being focused on more Islamophobic sentiments. So in other words, Pakistan among other Islamic countries being next in line for hatred on social media. I will give 3 main reasons. First of all, being black, When I think about racism, I think about three main regions. First region, very far-right conservative people. Second, dinner table families. This means people who have some thoughts against black people and their behavior and intelligence, but it doesn't bother them to any extremes, and they wouldn't do anything to a black person in public and likely don't have any genuine hatred in their hearts, but it's sometimes a back-and-forth mental debate when seeing things on the news or in person. This would be the most common type. And then the young people's establishment phase. This final part is basically Gen Z and Gen Alpha's singular thoughts, so not swayed by parents. To be swayed by a parent would make you a dinner table family. Young people's establishment phase in simple terms is when a young person, like a young adult or teenager, feels awkward as most people do, and turn to hating on a race to feel some kind of establishment within their mind and their lives. For example, you can see this with a lot of the trans debates. While in reality, most people don't care about what a person chooses to do with their bodies, if you feel like your life and your mind aren't clear and everything is unstable, you would likely turn to making fun of a trans person because in your eyes you feel secure by not being confused about your own gender. This makes you feel superior, especially if there is a community by your side, which is what a lot of adults do as well, including white supremacists. Now for racism to really work, you need three of these types of people. This is why you don't see as much racism towards Southeast Asian and East Asian people, because there may be one or two of these factors, but not all three. So the first region, in terms of Indians, very far-right conservative people. These people would likely be in support of India when it comes to denouncing Pakistani people and Islam as a whole. This is because of Israel's support of India, as well as India not being an Islamic country. And so this would likely connect in a racist person's mind that Pakistan people do not align with their values. So this is an unfortunate possibility that we could see in the future. The next region would be dinner table families. Now dinner table families would likely never not have thoughts about any race, but because they are only opinion-based, they also have morals. This would mean that they would likely still gossip about every race, but that would include Pakistan and, although not a race, Islam as a whole. And so dinner table families would not have a lot to say against Indians in proportion to Islam. Then the final region, young people's establishment. Young people's establishment tend to be crowd followers regardless, and therefore whatever they are given, they will accept and post about. My second point would be Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is a German word, used to describe pleasure that comes from learning of or witnessing the misery or humiliation of another person. We saw this with the rise of cancel culture and the public shaming of individuals. To differentiate Schadenfreude from holding someone accountable would mean to call someone out, then leaving them alone when they apologize or admit. Schadenfreude is a call-out, but also a yearning to see their reaction and response. So for example, on Reddit, if you make a post saying you hate being Indian, you'll find new comments almost every week from somebody saying any variation of, well, the things people say are true, or, well, why don't you try deodorant, or similar. The reason why they go on to clearly vulnerable people's posts to weigh in their unwanted opinion is because of their Schadenfreude. They want to push someone to their limits. My third and likely final point would be the world we live in. On the screen is a graph showing the likely motion of racist or discriminatory trends that we will likely witness in the future. Unfortunately, some people will never stop being racist for as long as the world continues. Think about it, the richest man in the world is an African. Meanwhile, the poorest region in the world is Africa. He is not using his money to help Africa as far as I can see, and he is currently living somewhere in America and constantly tweeting about his hatred for other people, especially immigrants, despite being one himself. An option he has is using even just 5% of his money and political power to help rebuild and structure poorer regions. That way those places would be livable and people wouldn't have to immigrate in the first place. Instead, he complains about said immigrants and doesn't do anything with his billions to aid any of the countries these people are coming from. One could think, well, it's not his responsibility, but he is the richest man in the world. The entire planet Earth. This means he's richer than any politician you could possibly vote for. He could lose 50% of his money and still be rich. Even 1% of his money is more than any amount of money most people will ever see in their lifetime. Even 0.01% of his money is more than the amount any will see. And yet he's not contributing to even his home continent. If a man like this has supporters, then it tells you the type of political climate we're in. We're in a world that is not looking for solutions, but instead pointing fingers at everyone. And it's always the weak that suffer. Therefore, to end this video, I will give you ways to deal with experiencing racism if you're an Indian. The only best thing you can do is the conform or complain chart that is currently on the screen, and I have this for almost every scenario of racism you might encounter. This was made for Black people in mind, but you can also apply this to yourself.